have done this novel any place other than Los Angeles, and that the novel is set in Glendale, home to James M. Cain's Mildred Pierce, makes Ariel Swartley's assessment of the novel in Los Angeles Magazine as beyond noir all the more gratifying, as the narrator tries to come to terms with the crumbling American dream that she has struggled so hard, psychically, physically, and emotionally, to achieve. Dare I say, she discovers her own personal Chinatown. So, without further delay, and with great pleasure, I will read a few brief selections from Entertaining Disasters. In my previous life as a hostess, I did dinner parties on a regular basis, despite the fact that each episode left me a shredded wreck. For months afterward, I suffered facial tics and blurred vision and felt stupid, my mind gooey as marmalade with a shocking loss of energy requiring extended bed rest and daily afternoon naps. It was as if the effort had induced a chronic culinary fatigue syndrome. While my guests were on the premises, I felt occupied, infected by their presence, resenting them as if they were an invading army. Once they came through my door, I couldn't remember why I'd invited them and couldn't wait until they'd left. All I could think of from the moment they were crowding me in my kitchen, a glass of freshly poured, properly chilled Domaine Chandon in their hands, smiling meekly as they struggled to relax, trying to act interested in the mess I was making of the stove, the countertops, my life, until the moment they were sitting at my table, ingesting whatever it was I'd thrown at them in my panic. All I could think of as I watched them chew, swallow, and attempt to keep the conversational flow going was, how can I get them out of here sooner rather than later? And no one ever reciprocated. Despite what the etiquette books say, either they didn't read them, or they didn't care, or they felt the discomfort behind my hard, frozen smile and chose not to invite it onto their own turf. I justified this damage, launched a new undertaking, when my hunger for human encounters hit the crisis point. I'd wake suddenly from a long spell of total isolation, feverishly in need of social contact. I was like a hiker crossing the desert who forgets to drink until she's collapsed in a dehydrated stupor. My tongue was thick for lack of use, unable to concentrate on anything other than lingual communion. My mind was like an enraged beast. I had no choice but to cut it loose from whatever writing assignment it might be lashed to, and watch as it circled the room like a lonely child, frantically wondering whom it might get to come over and play. By the time I actually gathered a group, something that can take months in the challenging minefield of Southern California's urban sprawl, murky social hierarchies, unpredictable work, vacation, and babysitter schedules, I invariably overdid it. I didn't know how to act. I couldn't find the balance between caring and sharing and wanting to throw my guests off the deck. The deck I refer to as 2 stories above the front garden. We used to dine there during the summer before we found workers. Footnote number 1. Third world economic refugees who risked their lives illegally crossing the borders, lured by the dream of a better life. Little did they know their cheap and desperate labor would be providing the better life for us, while they slept in converted garages in Compton and committed slow suicide with a steady diet at McDonald's. Workers willing to install a garden in the steeply sloping, multi-terraced backyard. I imagined more than one guest impaled on a wrought iron trellis for failing to eat the last bite of hand-stuffed pumpkin ravioli or homemade saffron and anise ice cream. Who the hell were they to push aside my passionate labors after what I'd gone through to get them a pile of lovingly crafted food to my table? What would they think of my cooking if, once they were trapped by the trellis like specimen insects pinned to a display board, I scraped the remainders into their gaping, groaning mouths? Satisfied that they'd swallowed every last bite, I'd wash it down with a glass of arsenic-laced entree-appropriate wine and desert them with brandy and an exploding cigar. This was the vision that, with each event, began to unspool in my mind, replaying on my psychic big screen for days, weeks, even months afterward. I started to fear for my sanity and my guests' safety. Doubting my ability to curb this criminal intent, I stopped giving dinner parties. So that's the first lecture, and just one other quick one that I think you'll enjoy. No one drinks in Los Angeles. This despite civilization's booze-soaked roots. Agriculture began when hunter-gatherers discovered a pleasant buzz from beverages made with fermented grain. A steady supply of raw ingredients required staying in one place to tend crops. Former nomads needed a drink at the end of a day in the fields to soothe their wanderlust. The ancient Greeks valued drinking over dinner. The after-dinner drinking party known as the symposium was the main point of the evening. Great literature resulted, including Plato's Symposium and Apology, featuring the classic icebreaker, "The life which is unexamined is not worth living." In Los Angeles, I found it best not to examine life too closely. In Los Angeles, there's a slippery slope in every sip. This is due largely to Los Angeles being a driving town, a distances between place. This is good for preserving lives, but bad for society. Society needs to get pickled every once in a while. New York and San Francisco are walking towns, and when I lived in those cities, I got pickled on a regular basis, along with the rest of the residents. In New York, drinking is a necessary form of stress reduction. High achievers drink in New York. Of course, you have to be a high achiever to drink in New York because booze costs so much there. In San Francisco, drinking is affordable entertainment. San Franciscans love their drinkers like they love their crooked streets and gear-grinding hills and perpetual fog. San Francisco employed its favorite drinkers as newspaper columnists, Herb Cain and Stanton Delaplane and Charles McCabe, who used to walk down the hill from his North Beach apartment to start his morning with a stiff one at the local Italian social club. People read them over cocktails, a Remus Fizz with the morning edition, a martini with the afternoon final. Drinking was always a part of San Francisco's character, its morose charm. Los Angeles packages character, produces character, markets character, and that's a sober undertaking. Movers and shakers in Los Angeles bend themselves into yoga pretzels or jog past the urge to have a pop. Angelinos believe that an hour lost to an alcoholic buzz is self-abuse, an opportunity missed to put you a step closer to the three-picture deal, starring role, or prime piece of real estate. Then you can have a drink, or two, or three. You're even allowed a few stabs at rehab, as long as it's in the right places. Betty Ford's in Rancho Mirage, or Promises, Malibu. In Los Angeles, drinking is tainted with pathos. It's considered noir. Drinkers are those people who sit in their short-sleeved Hawaiian shirts in the dark. Short-sleeved Hawaiian shirts, footnote number 2, think Harvey Keitel or Mickey Rourke. In the dark, on blindingly bright days in the bars lining Western Avenue, talking about what might have been. And their sagging guts and flabby arms, their flaccid thighs flopping out of their shorts are another reason not to drink. Consider the high caloric content of a single glass of Merlot or shot of tequila. Mention carbohydrates, and I can hear the last drinkers in Los Angeles dumping a luscious Sauvignon Blanc as they permanently switch to water. We're all smiley-faced and dutifully driving the freeways here, scared straight and on edge. Not that I want any more drinkers in Los Angeles. It's hard enough to stay between the lines on an 8-lane freeway at 90 miles an hour when you're sober. I'm grateful to everyone who abstains. Still, I'd like some relief from what passes for life here. I welcome earthquakes for taking us outside the quotidian, something a daily drink or two could do. I wonder if these geologic upheavals are tied to our pent-up tension. Thank you all.